What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy YouTube channel. We're back with another edition of our Top 25 series. We are going over the Alabama Crimson Tide today. So we're going to be diving into their offense, defense. After a disappointing year last year, I think, with Bryce Young, even though they went 11-2, I know they were expected to be better. What does it look like this year? There are a ton of question marks about the Alabama team this year, especially at that quarterback position and maybe even at the wide receiver position. So we're going to be diving into their offense, their defense, their schedule. What does it look like? So if you're an Alabama fan, hit that like button. We'll be, any of you college football fan excited for the season to start this week, then you should be definitely hitting that like button because we're going to be giving you these team previews. We've done 23 already. This is number 2, Alabama. So hit that like and subscribe button. We'll catch you on the other side. All right, let's talk about Alabama, and let's talk about that season last year for a second. 11-2 points per game, though. They were up there. They were a top 5 team, 41.1 points per game. They were better than Georgia by, I think, a half of a point. Then defensively, they were top 10 in the country for opponents' points per game. But I would say the inconsistency at the wide receiver position was the huge problem for Alabama last year. And then maybe the offensive line. There was a lot of little things last year that just didn't click. That offense didn't look very good. There's a lot of little things that kind of happened out there. Jahmyr Gibbs was good for them, but pass blocking wasn't great. And then obviously the losses that they had, losing to LSU was a bad loss, and Tennessee, but they only lost those games by 4 points. So when you think of like the 2 losses that they had, they only lost by 4 points. So is Alabama really that bad? Or was it just like, hey, they lost by 4 points combined? They can still bounce back this year. But I think a big part of that was Bryce Young being able to be Bryce Young, and they don't have that anymore. And I think that is really the key of that of the season is that quarterback room. Let's talk about their offensive line. What do we see here, Christian?
They have one of the better offensive tackles in the country, and J.C. Latham over on the right side. They're returning 60%. Seth McLaughlin is one of the returners. He was in at center last year. He didn't rotate in. It was Darian Dalcourt that rotated in. He's now sliding over to right guard. The big one, though, is Caden Proctor. This is still a projection. There's a battle going on at left tackle, but Caden Proctor is pushing for the starting left tackle role. And I think that he's going to get it because what they've got there right now just isn't going to do it. I also want to point out that their offensive line was not that good last year in terms of like Bryce had to make some stuff happen. I'm intrigued to see the steps forward with this offensive line. They're going to need it because they don't have Bryce back there anymore. And I'm sure we're about to talk about that.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think between that left, that's a huge battle right now. Caden Proctor versus Elijah Pritchett. You talked about it today in a report that I read about it. Was like, hey, this is going to be interesting there. But they did move Darian Dalcourt and Tyler Booker around because they said they wanted a better strength inside. It gives them a little bit more versatility. And I think that's why I think Proctor might get the role because they do like Tyler Booker a little bit, put him on that left side with him. And I think that's kind of where we're looking at where that battle is going to be. But these are projections. So Alabama fans don't yell at us. That's just what's going on in camp right now. Offensively, yes. So when we're talking about offensively here, who's going to start at the quarterback position, I think is the biggest one. Now, we have Ty Simpson there, but it's easily could just be a Ty Simpson or Jalen Milroe or Tyler Bunchner. Like when we're talking about those 3 guys in terms of like a college depth chart. Then at the running back position, you have Jace McClellan, Roydell Williams, Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, who I think is a stud. Justice Haynes is someone that I think is one of the best running backs in college football as a freshman coming in, not obviously overall. And in wide receivers, I don't know. Like, I think that there's some guys there, but I don't know how much, like, they have to really step up. That crew was not good. Ja'Cory Brooks was supposed to have a great year last year, did not have a great year. Malik Benson coming in, he's been talked about, but again, a lot of unknowns out there. Emmanuel Henderson is Christian's guy, though. He might talk about him a little bit. He moved over to wide receiver. CJ Dupree might be their best receiver at tight end position coming over Maryland. So like that might be their guy. It really comes down to that quarterback battle, though. What is it going to be there? And at times you saw Milroe's athleticism last year, but he didn't look all that great in the games that he went out there against Texas A&M. And that start that he had, you saw his limitations as a passer. But then Ty Simpson, who was a 5-star kid, didn't look amazing. And then they brought in Tyler Bunchner. And I think the big question is, what is this offense going to look like under Tommy Rees?
Yeah, the quarterback, it starts with the quarterback. We talked about the two losses being a total of 4 points, but I think the reason we think of that Alabama team is a disappointing unit, especially, even on offense, but just a unit as a whole is they should have lost multiple games. They should have lost the Texas game. I think if Quinn Ewers is healthy, I think they do lose that. Bryce Young is the reason that they did not. And so now you look at this team and you say, okay, well, they brought back a ton of wide receivers. They brought back their entire running back room. They added to it. They lost Jahmyr Gibbs. And so this offense to me is like, this is a transition type of offense where I think they might extend this quarterback battle into the early parts of their schedule. The problem, we'll talk about the schedule later, but they only have one game where they can really do that. They need to find the starter before week 2.
Yeah.
I still like Ja'Cory Brooks. I think Ja'Cory Brooks still has the potential to be like the best receiver in this room. Jermaine Burton, just very inconsistent last year. I wasn't really, happy with what he did out there. I do like Emmanuel Henderson as a potential slot option. He just very dynamic playmaker that just doesn't really fit the running back position. So I'm intrigued to see his transition over to wide receiver. I know he already did that last year, but I think that he could have a role. Kobe Prentice is okay. I think Isaiah Bond is probably going to be on the field a little bit more than he was last year, which is probably a good thing. I don't know. It starts with this running back room. I think we're going back to the Josh Jacobs era, Josh Jacobs, Damian Harris era, where it's just we need to run the ball 30 times a game in order to move the ball. And I think they've got the running back room to do it.
Yeah. And that's what I mentioned with Tommy Reese too. Like when he's going to come in here and kind of, I know it's not going to be his system, but I do think it's going to be a lot of two back sets. And I think that when you're thinking of like what they're going to do in their scheme, they're going to have to run the ball. I mean, they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of control clock and do those things like you mentioned. The question is that type of offense able to win games and at a high level and go to the college football playoff? I think that's the thing that we haven't seen yet. And I think that's the big question for this offense. I do like Brooks like you do. I think Ja'Cory could have a good year, but there's no one in this room with the quarterback that I'm like, oh yeah, they definitely have an offense that can take off in the SEC. And I think that is the struggle, because even last year when we're talking about this offense, and as much as we like, Bryce Young, they finished 11th in yards per game. That's the first time they finished outside the top 10 since 2017. That's with Bryce Young. Now we're talking about, I don't know, right? And I think that's the big question mark. And, notable losses on the offensive side. Jahmyr Gibbs, yeah. I mean, he was a top 12 pick in the NFL draft. Then you have Bryce Young, who was the number 1 pick. Tyler Steen, Tommy Brockmeyer transferred out. You had multiple wide receivers transfer out as well. So it wasn't just that they moved on. Aaron Anderson to LSU. I think that's a big loss. I think Nick Saban did like Aaron Anderson a lot. And I think there were some things there. JoJo Earl to TCU, Christian Leary to Georgia Tech. And then you look Trayshawn Holden to Oregon. They lost a lot of wide receivers in that room.
They did, but I think the reason they lost that is because those wide receivers couldn't really get on the field. Now, I think there's something to be said about those wide receivers not getting on the field over what we saw last year, because Jahmyr Gibbs was their best receiver. I think that is actually the wide receiver that matters the most, and he's a running back. So I do expect Jam Miller to provide a type of Jahmyr Gibbs role. I think he's got some pass catching ability. I think that could also be Jace. I think Jace is a good pass catcher as well. So I think they can fill that type of role. But if this offense is built on the run, then giving your running backs all of the targets is not going to work. The reason it could work last year is because Bryce could extend the field and find those guys downfield. So I don't know. We've talked about, it's just plug and play with a lot of these teams. This is notable. This is not a plug and play situation for Alabama, and that's why I'm a little worried about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. We usually talk about, they just reload. I don't know if they reloaded here. And I think that's something to test with like what Kirby was building at Georgia now, right? Like, I think that's a little bit different of what Alabama has. Now, when you talk about recruits, so let's get out there and let's talk about Alabama. They were still number 1 recruiting class in the country. And to be honest, they had the best recruiting class probably that they've ever had under Nick Saban. When you're looking at just overall composite rank, everything there, they went out and got guys. And Caden Proctor's that number 1 guy. He was the number 1 recruit at his position in the state, number 5 nationally. He really flipped from Desmond Moines, Iowa, and he came over there, and they are honestly talking about him getting in there and starting this year. Justice Haynes, another kid that when you watch his tape, it just pops off. Jalen Hale is a guy that we didn't really mention, but he could get some run this year. 6'1", 185 from Texas. He's a very good wide receiver. Put Malik Benson on there. He's a 4-star, but he's from community college. He's coming as a junior. But again, he came in as the number 1 community college transfer, junior college transfer there. Richard Young as well. So like they have guys out there. Eli Holstein they like a little bit too. And you look at that, that's a ton of 4 stars and 5 stars there. They definitely have guys, but I think the question is like they've missed on some of these guys over the time. They get 5 stars and 4 stars, and they usually hit on these guys. But over the last 3 years, you've seen kind of that attrition a little bit.
Yeah, but maybe it's time for the pendulum to swing back, right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to hit with Haynes. I think Proctor is, going to hit as well, especially if he's already pushing for a starting role as a freshman. Richard Young's an interesting one. I wasn't as high on him as maybe some others when I watched that film. Malik Benson is a player. I think that he will work his way into that rotation, whatever that rotation is. But once again, I made a joke before we started recording that it'd be really funny if it's one of these 2 freshmen that ends up being the quarterback because of what we've seen from this quarterback battle. And I don't think Saban's going to have a lot of patience with any of those guys. So I don't think that's going to be the case. If it is, I think it's going to be Lonergan instead of Holstein, but that's just me being biased in how I evaluated them. So, but overall, this is a good group. Obviously, it's Alabama. They recruit well. I think that there are some hits in here. I just hope not as many misses as the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think Haynes can hit, and I think Haynes can be that guy. We've seen them just lean on that running back room too, and that could be it. But I think I think one way to look at this is Malik Benson's got to hit because they brought him in as that number 1 guy in that wide receiver room. If he can be that guy, let's say he elevates himself to alpha 1, and then you have Ja'Cory Brooks and Burton being like very solid wide receiver 2s. All right, this offense feels a little bit better now. Like I feel like you're more comfortable. I just think there's so many question marks and long shots there. I think that's the key thing there. Key transfers. I can't believe I'm talking about Tyler Blanchard being a key transfer and actually in a quarterback battle from Notre Dame, but here we are. He did not look good at Notre Dame, but here we are talking about him maybe winning a job at Alabama, which is the craziest thing I've ever probably said out loud. I like CJ Dupree. I think he's going to be very, very solid. And if you saw what Cameron Latsu did in this offense, I think CJ is a better receiver and maybe a little bit better athlete. And I think that could be something that you have to watch for this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. The interesting thing with Buckner is it was a late transfer. It was after spring ball, and that worries me for the quarterback room because Tommy Rees saw Buckner play at Notre Dame. He was there, and I think we kind of know what he is. Him and Milroe are actually similar in play style. I think Buckner's a good runner. I don't know if he has an arm like really at all. So I'm so worried about the quarterback position, but yeah, he is a key transfer because I think I've seen some things that he's the favorite, but also no matter what you read, all 3 of the dudes in that battle are currently the favorite. It depends on who you're reading. So.
Yeah, 100%. Just depends on where the hell you're reading it from. As far as impact players, I just put both quarterbacks on here because I don't know. Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson. Like one of those guys who wins the job has got to be impact. I do think Jalen Milroe is an impact guy though. And like the way that Tommy Rees uses quarterbacks, Milroe fits that a little bit, especially with his power runs, especially with his read options, little things like that he does. And I understand that they're probably using Saban's offense and it's going to be a hybrid, but using Milroe probably fits there. I do think Ty Simpson is a better pocket passer, ability to kind of get it out mechanics wise. So I think it really just depends on where they think is the best direction for this offense. If it's run heavy, I think Milroe is going to get the job. I think they'll have Milroe, Jace, and those guys and just going to run it down your throat. And then you have Ja'Cory Brooks here. And I like Jace. I think Jace getting slept on a little bit. And I think Jace is going to be a very good running back as well.
Yeah, the more we talk about this offense, the better I feel about it, because if it is Milroe or Buckner in there, I do think that introduces a different dynamic to the rushing attack that they haven't had in a little bit. I don't recall Mac Jones running read option, but I think Milroe and Buckner will. So
yeah,
I do feel good about this rushing attack. It's just when they need to go get a bucket, when they need to go throw the ball to win the game, I don't know if they have that guy on the roster. But the good thing, and we're about to talk about their defense, there might not be a whole lot of games where they have to do that. So, maybe that's the silver lining here, right?
Yeah, and I think with the defensive side, they've had one of the most dominant players in college football in Will Anderson, who's actually showing out in preseason football right now. So he's pretty good. He's a stud. I mean, he had 58 tackles at Alabama, 34 sacks, 34 and a half sacks. So now, all right, what do we have? What do they have now? What is returning out there that we can look forward to?
So Kool-Aid McKinstry has a case to be one of the best corners
Yeah.
in the nation. Crazy name too. Love that. Dallas Turner kind of steps in. I had a bit of a take. I think Dallas Turner has all the tools to be a Will Anderson level player. I just don't know that he's put them all together just yet. But I think if you can get some really good play out of him to kind of, make up for the Will Anderson loss, I think this defense has a huge ceiling. Malachi Moore is your star. They're talking about him as, one of the better stars, and to be the star in a Saban defense is very important. And so he's probably going to be the smartest football player out there. You've got freshman Caleb Downs slotted in to start at free safety. I think that is huge. That is a good player. And then overall, like when you look at the ceiling of this defense, I think last year was up and down. There were times where, Eli Ricks was getting killed out at corner. I'm not certain that they'll have that this year. So I think that this, despite the big losses, I think that this defense could actually be better.
Yeah, and I think that's where they have to have. I think when you're talking about Alabama this year, they got to go old school, have that strong defense and that rushing attack like we talked about. Notable losses. Yeah, Will Anderson was there. I love Brian Branch, and I know you
Me
like
too.
Brian Branch as well. Like I thought he was just a stud. And when you talk about what he can do, an impact player all over the field, like I was a big fan of him. Byron Young as well, Jordan Battle as well. But I think the big two are the first two.
Yeah, I do think that Malachi Moore fills that branch role pretty well too.
Yeah.
So I think that they're in good shape there. And like I said, if Dallas Turner kind of takes another step forward, I think he fills the Anderson role. Now, I do want to, the caveat is that no one is filling the Will Anderson role quite like Will Anderson did. Byron Young was a key piece too. Jordan Battles, potentially starting this year in the NFL. So
Yeah.
these are key pieces, but I do think that this defense is in really good shape right now.
And they did lose some transfers. Demoy Kennedy went to Colorado. You're talking like Traycon Fegans, who we talked about with USC. He went there. They lost some guys there, but yeah, these four definitely are definitely the high guys there. As far as recruits go, yeah, like we talked about, they had a number one recruiting class for a reason. Keon Keeley is a guy, 6'5", 242, number 3 overall player in college football, coming in as a freshman. Number one as position, number 1 edge guy. Then you look at Caleb Downs, like you mentioned. Kid is fun to watch. Go watch him out of Georgia. They went to Georgia and got this kid. Number 1 is position. He is a ton of fun, and he can fit in there, be that playmaker safety that you really like. Pierre as well. He was a guy number 4 at his position. Like they got 2 of the best edge rushers in the class, and I think that's something to kind of know here. They went after it, and they went after it hard. Then you have Desmond Ricks, 4-star kid out of IMG. Again, talented group that they brought in.
Yeah, this is a great class as usual. This is the Alabama way. But I think that when you're looking at this defense, the edge rushers that they really went heavy on have an opportunity to be rotational players. I think that there is an opportunity for them to get on the field. And like we talked about, Caleb Downs is already their starter, has an opportunity to be one of the best freshmen in all of college football on either side of the ball. So great class. Justin Jefferson, just want to mention him. Great player as well. We're going to have 2 Justin Jeffersons in the NFL in a few years, so that's going to be fun. At least they're on different sides of the ball, but good class as usual for Alabama.
Yeah, Jefferson's coming in as a number 2 community college player or junior college player in the country. He's behind, Malik Benson, who's number 1 Alabama got as well. And Justin Jefferson can play. And they even talked about him slotting in and getting some rotation early. And you're going to be talking about You're going to hear his name this year, 100%. Key transfers, and when you're looking at here, again, they didn't really go after the transfers on this side. Trey Amos is a guy that's kind of getting a little bit of buzz there from Louisiana Raging Cajuns. He came in. Jalen Key as well. He's on here. Tresman Marshall from Georgia. Again, he came in as a 4-star linebacker there. Probably helps out that linebacker area there. But just solid pieces. I don't see any impact players, but just solid.
No, but for what it's worth, all 3 slated to start per some projections right now. Now, I do think that some of these freshmen might put a wrinkle in that, or the guys that they're bringing in. Trey Amos good player. Just he's held, I believe the stat was over his 3 years at Louisiana, he's held opponents to less than 40% completion percentage when targeted. So that's why I mentioned, Eli Ricks was getting burned out there. I don't think Trey Amos is, and I know Kool-Aid McKinstry isn't. So you've got two really solid corners, and then Malachi Moore slotting in as that star in the slot. I think this secondary looks a lot better with the additions, and Jalen Key too. I mean, I think that's good pieces for that secondary that desperately they needed that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at Kool-Aid, he had 15 passes defended last year. They didn't throw his way. Like, he just shut down everything. Like, Kool-Aid is one of those guys there. I think Dallas Turner can play a role as well. Like, when you're thinking of just guys out there that can just make tackles, be an impact. Chris Braswell as well. Like, just because I think he's playing that jack position there. You have to like that. Earl Little maybe coming out there. I know Malachi Moore is in there. Earl Little can come out there too and be that impact guy. I like Caleb Downs as well. Could have thrown him on here. But overall, just solid players. I think one interesting thing is, like, we didn't really talk about their defensive line that much. Jaheim Otis, Tim Smith, some of these guys on there. It'll be interesting to see how they step up.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked so much about all of these players. I think you can make a case for all of these guys being impactful in some way, and in different ways throughout this season. I think there are going to be games where they really need that secondary to step up. There are going to be games where they really need a good pass rush. There are going to be games where, the Ole Miss game in week 4 here, I think they're going to really need that defensive line to step up and hold its own against the run. So overall, just a very, very good defense and a reason to be a little higher on Alabama. That's probably why they come in at number 2 on ESPN's FBI rankings.
Yeah, and when you look at their schedule, so when we're talking about when their defense needs to step up, it's their secondary week 2 against Texas. So they got the big game versus Texas there at South Florida, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, Kentucky, and then the Chattanooga game in Auburn. A harder schedule than Georgia had. We went over to Georgia and we talked about how that schedule kind of plays out. Alabama does have the harder schedule. The Texas game is massive, right? If they win that game, then we're talking about Alabama probably going back to the playoffs, at least an SEC title game, because they could definitely win there. I think it is massive there. But again, they got tough games. LSU, they got to beat. Getting these games at home, though, I think it definitely helps.
Yeah, at Texas A&M is a game.
Yeah,
that's a game. We're not super high on A&M, but I mean they've kind of figured out how to play Alabama over the last couple of years. And so, I mean, A&M, that's another one. I mentioned the Texas game last year, but A&M was another one that Alabama should have lost. But
they should have lost that game.
It was Bryce again that kind of bailed them out. Even though I believe that was the game that it was kind of Bryce's fault that they were also in that position. I think that was a pretty rough game. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do think the Texas game looks like a loss on paper right now, just with the quarterback position, but it's Alabama. The last time I felt this way about Alabama, they went to the national title and they lost, but they went to the national title. I do feel like there are a few losses on this schedule. I think maybe 3 losses. I think Texas A&M, and LSU are losses. I think there are a couple toss-ups. I think Tennessee could give them fits if that secondary isn't as sure as I hope it is. I think Auburn's always a wrinkle. It's a rivalry. I don't think they lose that game, but you never know. And it's at Auburn, so you never know. And then Ole Miss is another one where I think they have a recipe to beat Alabama. I just don't know if they pull it off, but I'm really, really skeptical about this Alabama team this year, unfortunately. Crimson Tide fans, I'm sorry.
So are you going under 10.5 then?
It's tough because I think I mentioned 3 games,
yeah,
and then I mentioned a couple others. And when I do that, I normally would hit the under, but I will. I'll say under, but I would not bet on Alabama this year, one way or another.
Yeah, I would go under as well, but I do think that this is the opportunity for Saban to say, F everybody, I'm going to just go win the national title. Like, let's just build this team. This is like a Saban year of, like, you thought we were going to be bad and look at us now. And I think now I do think it could has a chance to be that, but I also think it has a chance to just go off the rails completely. And we're looking at a season that we haven't seen in a long time, where you have an 8-win Alabama team. You're like, what the hell happened? And it really just comes down, like you said, that quarterback position, how it looks. And I will say, I think the sneakiest game on this one is Arkansas versus Arkansas. And I think Arkansas, they've had Arkansas's number, but I do think that team is built to compete with Alabama. Like it's up there. And we got to give a shout out to our editor-in-chief, Clayton Gray out there. We appreciate you, Clayton, Arkansas alum. But I think that's the I think that those games right there are tough. I'm going to say under, but I don't feel comfortable betting against Saban. So like Alabama fans don't yell at me. But I think that, realistically, this team this is more question marks than we've seen for a Nick Saban-led team in a long time. And I think it's going to be interesting. And Saban being the ultimate coach, the ultimate competitor, I think he knows how this works. But we've talked about it. I'd even talked about it last year. I thought his teams had looked undisciplined the last couple of years. And especially last year, all the penalties, all these little things that had happened to him. And could it be the pressure of Georgia is mounting against him, where he's feeling a lot of pressure to go out there and compete against Georgia? And then also he's just losing some of that aura around him. And I think that's the big question mark heading into this year.
Yeah. The recruiting classes kind of indicate that might not be the case, but the stuff on the field matters more than the recruiting classes. And so I'm intrigued. I think, like I said, the last time I felt this down on Alabama, they went and proved me wrong. And I know that they're going to have a chip on their shoulder because the AP poll came out and they were not this high. They were not number 2, I don't believe, in the AP poll. I don't remember where exactly they were, but I think they were 3 or 4. But
yeah,
Alabama's used to be in the number 1 or number 2 team when that poll comes out. So we'll see. Maybe Saban takes a page out of Kirby's book and hangs that up on the wall. But I don't know. This is an interesting team, and I think maybe one of those quarterbacks steps up and makes us look silly. Maybe they don't though. So who knows?
Yeah. All right. We appreciate you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. Alabama, let us know in the comments. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that you're on that track? Do you think you can go to the SEC title game, or do you think it's maybe going to be a long year for you guys? Let us know what you guys are cooking down there. All right. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys on the last one. We're going to our number 1 team on the next one. If you've been with us all 24, we appreciate you guys more than you guys know.